Welcome to Training Module 3, where we look in more detail at the Organisation Capability Maturity Framework. This module is as follows. In Module 2, you learned about Dynamic Systems Maturity Theory. In this section, we look at its application to organisation development. We then review the 15 dynamics of an organisation, followed by a look at the building blocks or the constructs that underpin dynamics. Reviewing how maturity levels for dynamics and constructs can be used to measure the overall organization maturity and to guide improvement. Organization Capability Maturity Framework is designed to be flexible to each individual, team, or organization context. We will now look at some use cases. Finally, you will become familiar with the Organization Capability Maturity Framework self-service digital platform. First up, let's recap on systems theory and how dynamic systems maturity theory is applied to organization change, transformation, and improvement. We now look at the organization as a human system. A system is a network of interdependent elements that work together to accomplish the overall system aim. The elements bring together the relevant components, such as people, processes, and assets, as examples. Organization subsystems include its functions, for example, manufacturing, HR, or IT. Subsystems act interdependently for the common good of the organization overall. A change in one subsystem usually affects other subsystems and the overall organization system. The system can be considered as the organization overall, or as a division, or a department, or a team. Most organizations are open systems in that they are influenced by changes in the external environment and must continually adapt to these changes. They also influence the external environment both directly and indirectly. In Module 1, we noted the importance for an organization to monitor and engage in its external environments. We also noted the significant changes at speed that are happening in the world today and expected to continue in the future, leading to volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, or VUCA, and the need for greater agility in the organization as a result of this. Because the subsystems and elements in an organization are interconnected and interdependent, if one part of the organization is impacted by an external environment change, or if one part initiates a change internally, this will generally have an impact on other parts of the organization and the system overall. This is why improving an organization's capability maturity level, which in effect is a system and subsystem improvement approach, is so important. As capability improves, so does agility to anticipate and respond to changes in the external and internal environments. Other benefits include improved innovation, collaboration, productivity, and leadership. Let us now look at systems theory and practice. Dynamic systems maturity theory is a scientific means of understanding and improving organization systems, how they function, why they perform at a specific level, and the nature of their culture and learning and development process. The Organization Capability Maturity Framework is a practical application of dynamic systems maturity theory. It's designed to provide a step function improvement in how organizations manage change, transformation, and performance improvement, and it provides a solid roadmap to greater agility, innovation, collaboration, and productivity. A maturity level is reflective of how well an organization functions, its practices, its behaviors, and the outcomes. It is also reflective of its equivalent learning level and ability to learn and adapt to change. In Module 2, we reviewed the research and science that underpins dynamic systems maturity theory. In practice, we work with a comprehensive body of knowledge and maturity assessment tool based on 7 levels of maturity, and a simple set of rules presented that reflect organization learning theory at each maturity level. Where appropriate and in exceptional circumstances, we can carry out deep diagnosis using the full 15-level maturity scale of dynamic systems maturity theory as part of an organization maturity framework. We should not underestimate the importance of the maturity scale. Unlike many other models, these are not arbitrary descriptive levels, but are defined levels of functioning underpinned by organization psychology and science. As a reference model, the Organization Capability Maturity Framework establishes norms and is valid for comparisons. Practices, behaviors, and performance are defined for each level of maturity in every level of the model. The model can be applied to the overall organization system, its subsystem, and its elements. Let's look at the architecture of the Organization Capability Maturity Framework. For the organization overall, we titled the model the Organization Maturity Index. We classify the elements of the system into meaningful groups of related elements. We call these group classifications dynamics. Dynamics reflect the forces that influence the organization functioning and learning level, which we call the maturity level. For each dynamic, the foundation system elements we call constructs. These are the foundation building block capabilities for any organization, where we can measure the maturity levels quite accurately and consistently. So as we consider the architecture of the Organization Capability Maturity Framework, there is a comprehensive body of knowledge that defines the maturity level and specific improvement guidance at every level for every dynamic and every construct, as well as the organization overall. Every element in the system is covered. We can measure the maturity level through online assessment at any point in the Organization Capability Maturity Framework architecture. That is, at a system level, dynamic, or construct level, and receive specific guidance for each as appropriate to the measured maturity level. The sensor level is a single question at the top of the organization and is used as a barometer or rapid health check. It has limited diagnostic function and is more indicative. The triage is useful for executive assessment, for quick fix and setting priorities for improvement, and this is a single question with multiple choice answer statements. Diagnostic assessment is more root cause analysis and guidance for the specific elements, and there's one question per construct, again with multiple choice statement answers. Deep diagnosis is used more in exceptional circumstances and with the support of an Organization Development Tools Institute certified professional. The key is that everyone in the organization is touched by the dynamics and the capabilities. So there is relevance up, down, and across the organization. And the Organization Capability Maturity Framework body of knowledge and assessment tools are easily accessible and usable for individuals and teams. This empowers everyone in the organization to leverage the body of knowledge to improve their role, their team, or their function as appropriate, and there's minimal training required. We will now look at each dynamic in the organization. There are 15 dynamics in the Organization Maturity Index. These represent the forces that influence behaviors in the organization and how external forces are reacted to. The dynamics apply at any level in any human socio-economic system. They are logical and understandable means to group constructs under, creating the building block capabilities for each dynamic. We can scientifically measure their maturity levels using a triage assessment. We can diagnose issues and plan improvements for each by measuring the maturity levels of each dynamics constructs. Specific improvement guidance is provided for all elements of the model for each level of maturity, in line with the learning development process for each specific element. We now look at the productive dynamics. These are the dynamics that relate to the physical environment and the work an individual does and how it is organized. On the right-hand side of the slide, you can see each dynamic and their relevant constructs. The physical environment is one of the most basic forces that influences an organization and its practices, behaviors, and performance. Think of it in terms of the first two basic needs in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the physiological need and the safety and security need. The work dynamic reflects the primary function people in the organization do. So how well is the work of individuals and teams organized and carried out? And how do people feel about their work and the work across the organization? In this slide, we look at the leadership dynamic as an example of how to demonstrate the structure and content of the body of knowledge. For each dynamic construct and the model, we present both the traits and the development guidance for each maturity level. The content is presented in a way that can be interpreted and applied in any organization context. Consider the human dynamics. These are the dynamics that relate to individual and group behaviors, relationships, and personalities, and how they influence performance and growth. The emotion dynamic is important in understanding the feelings that influence the behaviors and the performance of individuals and teams. The guidance provided is at the relevant maturity level in the development roadmap for the dynamic and aimed towards achieving positive and productive emotions within the culture. The cognition dynamic is concerned with how individuals, teams, and functions access, receive, process, and act on both tangible and intangible information, where decision-making is a central element. The personal dynamic focuses on individuals as regards their role and career and their place in the team, the function, and the organization. Whereas the interpersonal dynamic is concerned with the relationships and interactions between people, both formally and informally. We now look at the directive dynamics. These are the dynamics that relate to setting, organizing, and achieving the aims and ambitions of the organization, and how they motivate performance and growth. The management dynamic is about planning, organizing, controlling people and resources in a way that achieves the highest levels of performance in line with goals and the key performance indicators. Whereas the leadership dynamic is about the provision of inspiration, motivation, direction, and confidence to individuals, teams, projects, functions, the organization, and to external stakeholders. The strategy dynamic is about how well the vision and aims of the organization meet the needs of the various stakeholders in the organization. It's concerned with how well it goes about using the resources available to it and how well it develops its capabilities to achieve its vision and aim. The goal dynamics reflect the key forces that influence action and behaviors to achieve the specific objectives and performance standards for individuals and teams, and the outcomes and impact of their work achievements. The reward dynamic reflects the forces that motivate individuals and teams to carry out their work effectively and efficiently, and to develop their own capabilities and competence along with driving improvement in their own and their team's performance. It also reflects the level and quality of recognition for their achievements and its visibility. Finally, we look at the macro dynamics. These are the dynamics that relate to the business, environment, and resources that influence or are leveraged to achieve the aims, ambitions, and performance of the organization. The product dynamic reflects the forces that influence the ability of the organization to meet the needs of their customers. It includes products and services, whether they're traditional or digital, while creating value for the organization's stakeholders. The finance dynamic is not just about financial performance and compliance, it's about the economic impact the organization has for each stakeholder and the forces that influence these. The customer dynamic is about how well the target customer and markets are served and the relative value they place on your organization relating to the impact on society, ecosystems, and the product provided. The macro environment is concerned with external forces and resources, how the organization is influenced and influences external environment, the practices and behaviors and performance advantage as a result of this. It is also concerned about how well the organization leverages ecosystems to secure resources and advantage while adding value to the ecosystems it's engaged with. For each dynamic, there's a learning and development roadmap, which we call the maturity scale. Through online maturity assessment surveys, we can determine the scientific maturity level for each dynamic, directly through triage assessment, or indirectly and more precisely through the aggregation of the related constructs for each dynamic, determined through diagnostic level assessment. Here we can see a high-level presentation of all dynamics for the organization, giving an overall measure of the organization's health and making it easy to see where improvement action should focus. We now look at the constructs, which are the capability building blocks for each dynamic. In the current release of the Organization Capability Maturity Framework, there are 87 constructs, each structured similarly. These constructs are the foundation level of the Organization Maturity Index. They are the logical means to group systems elements such as people, processes, and tools as they relate to each construct. They can be applied to any subsystem in the organization, such as a function or a team. The functioning or learning level of a construct can be measured through our online diagnostic maturity assessment. The maturity scores for constructs for any specific dynamic can be aggregated to give an engineered dynamic maturity score. There is guidance that reflects the construct's measured maturity level in line with the learning development process for that construct. Let us look at the work dynamic. The work dynamic has 6 constructs. Work identity is about the degree of meaning the work an individual has for them and the recognition of their contribution by others. Work feedback is about how people receive and react to appreciation, improvement advice in relation to themselves and their work. Work integration is the degree of concern for the impact of an individual's or team's tasks and activities and outputs that they have on others. Work resourcing, how projects are resourced with time, people, technology, materials for the benefit of the individuals, teams, and organizations. Work significance, the actual or perceived significance of each role and its work, in particular its contribution to the organization, its performance and reputation. And finally, the work variety construct, concerned with the mix of tasks, actions, and skills required for a role and the meaning it has for the individual. The guidance in the panel is purely generic guidance. We will shortly review the detailed guidance for a sample construct. By having the relevant sample of people complete the construct maturity assessment, we build a more detailed and accurate picture of a construct's maturity level. and this is presented graphically. There is also, in addition to the measured maturity level, an indication of the lowest and the highest individual score, as well as the opportunity to rate the importance of a construct in an individual's opinion. In each participant in an assessment also has a text field after each question where they can provide supporting information that they base their answer on. Now look at another set of constructs, in this case the interpersonal dynamic. It also has 6 constructs. The first construct is boundaries. Boundaries are recognized as division lines within the system that can limit growth. Culture. Culture is the collective equivalent of mindset and determines how the collective behave in recognized patterns. Politics. Organization politics describe how people in the system deviate from strategic purpose and turn inward or outward with the purpose of benefiting from those activities undertaken to change personal level status or power. Atmosphere. Atmosphere is how people feel the temperature or growth potential of groups. It's how they experience the culture. Relationships under stress. The strength of relationships is important glue to cement progress. And teams. These are the virtual mini systems designed for output greater than the sum of the parts. As with all constructs, there is a graphical and text-based representation of the findings in the report, which can be viewed in real time. This slide displays an example of the body of knowledge for the decision-making construct in the cognition dynamic. You will note the presentation and structure is consistent with what we reviewed for a dynamic. It's also consistent for how a model is presented. So it's consistent for all levels in the framework. Each maturity level is represented in the learning development sequence or roadmap for that specific construct. There is a definition of the traits and the development guidance for each level. Let me remind you, there are very few rules in dynamic systems maturity theory. Skipping a level is not recommended as it breaks the learning development sequence and result in failure of the development action to gain traction or sustainability, or worst case, can cause regression from the existing measured maturity level. Think of this guidance as helpful calibration for action planning. And remember, it's based on the research in dynamic systems maturity theory that a major cause of change program failure was found to be change actions that were beyond the capability of the individual team or organization taking these change actions. We now consider the capability maturity assessment process and value, and the importance of improving capability maturity levels. The power of the organization capability maturity framework, body of knowledge, and capability maturity assessment tools is that there is something in it for everyone and every team across the organization. And it is not prescriptive, except for the small number of rules we explained in Dynamic Systems Maturity Theory Training Module 2. For some organizations, the framework is used formally across the organization, bringing consistency and a common approach to next generation management of change and improvement. Other organization teams and individuals get real value through informal use of the framework, whether it's just referencing the body of knowledge to answer a question or get some guidance, or gathering the team together in a room to take an assessment together, where the questions facilitate the discussion, analysis, and consensus on the current maturity level of a dynamic or a construct, and this enables the joint improvement and action planning. There can be many reasons to do a capability maturity assessment. In today's organization, questions arise and information is required to set the change or improvement strategy, plan, and execute that strategy. Here we've listed some of the common questions that come up, such as, where should we start? Where do we need to be? What's causing us to do something or to behave in such a way? Have we missed anything? Assessment can provide some or all of the answers depending on those present in the organization's context. The largest factor in the high failure rates of change programs or lost productivity relates to change actions being taken that are beyond the existing learning level of the organization or the subsystem. By knowing the maturity level of the elements of the system, we can take change actions that can be prioritized and calibrated to the existing maturity level, thus assuring traction and sustainability of those actions and their outcomes. As we build the capability maturity levels through its relevant development process and the related levels, we will come across different potential failure mechanisms. By using the model's maturity level action guidance, we mitigate against those failure mechanisms, some of which we have listed on the chart here. Maturity level measurement also baselines the organization to ensure effective and efficient mobilization for change, improvement, or transformation. And it does this using well-proven capability maturity reference model, which assures any internal or external benchmarking is valid. The standard 7-level reference model maturity scale is used for all capability maturity assessments, and it applies to every element of the OrgCMF architecture: the model, dynamics, and constructs. There are 4 assessment tiers, each serving different information needs in the organization. Let's look at these. At the highest level, we have the sensor assessment. This is a single question at the organization model level. All assessment questions have multiple choice statements for participants to select the answer from. The sensor assessment is like a rapid health check, or a call to attention or call to action. It has no deep analytical value. Triage assessment is often called executive assessment in other capability maturity models. It has a single question in the standard format for each dynamic. It is a better barometer of the overall organization health. It can be used for identification of urgent items that need a quick fix, while setting the overall priorities and direction for the organization change and improvement programs. Diagnostic assessment provides a deeper evaluation and allows analysis at the construct level of the model. It provides guidance for people and teams across the organization relevant to their roles and functions, and has the standard question and multiple choice answer statement, that is, 1 question per construct. The assessment tier questions can be configured in any way for any model, dynamic, or construct for the first 3 tiers by the organization capability maturity platform users, so they can target the specific mix of information, evaluation, and analysis specific to their organization context. Deep diagnosis provides deep assessment using the dynamic systems maturity model body of knowledge and the research platform assessment tool. It completes the same scope of the organization CMF assessment, but it breaks it down into the full 15-level organization science maturity levels. It is only used in special circumstances and in the assessment that is facilitated by the Organization Development Tools Institute. Here we can see a sample triage tier question for the emotion dynamic and the related answer statements the respondent chooses from. Participants also have the opportunity to provide supporting information as to the reasons for selecting a specific statement. They do this in the text box. The next example is an example of a diagnostic level question and the statements for the customer involvement construct at this level. Respondents can signal their view on the importance. Here we show a sample of the report for a diagnostic assessment of the customer dynamic, which has 5 constructs. You can see for this assessment the overall aggregate maturity score for the customer dynamic is 4, and the traits of this level are described along with the development focus. Also on the graphs, as well as the maturity score for each dynamic, you can also see the highest and lowest rating by the dashed lines. Users can expand out the content for each construct and view the description of the measured trait level and the development focus for that level. Finally, users can expand out and review the individual responses. The assessment administrator can set the permissions as to who can see and who cannot see reports in real time. We now consider selecting, designing, and configuring maturity assessments. Firstly, you should be clear on the problem or opportunity you wish to address and its scope, using a problem or opportunity statement. Secondly, the leader and/or the team should discuss and define the role maturity assessment will play in addressing the problem and opportunity. In other words, it should help answer some of these questions. What would we like to know? What are our information needs? From whom will we get this information? What is our intention for acquiring this information? How will we analyze and understand the information when we have it? And then who will take the information and its outcomes and take appropriate action? Then consider the organization capability maturity framework body of knowledge, and which of the dynamics or constructs represent the system elements that will address the information needs and contribute to the understanding, analysis, planning and improvement of actions relating to the defined problem or opportunity. Then consider which tier or mix of tiers of assessment should satisfy the information needs in the context of the stakeholders who are responsible for any change. The Organization Capability Maturity Framework digital platform presents a range of self-service and self-managed information services and assessment plans to choose from. Based on the organization's knowledge or with reference to our configuration guide, you can start the process of building your assessment. Our trained and certified partners are available locally to those organizations who wish to access external competence, capacity, supports and services to complement their own change and improvement teams. Organization Development Tools Institute partners can advise, train, and support on the use of the framework, assessment design, and can build and execute custom configurations. The Organization Development Tools Institute, where appropriate, can provide additional supports and expertise, as well as deep diagnostic assessment design and implementation where required. The flexibility and power of the Organization Capability Maturity Framework, in particular its scientific maturity assessment measurement, differentiates it from other models. It is the next generation of change management as a reference model. It goes from a single construct to any mix of model, dynamic, or constructs in an assessment. Capability maturity assessment can be used to support any organization transformation, change, or improvement across the organization, with value for individuals and teams at any level in the organization. Building capability maturity automatically builds culture as an integral part of development, with pre-configured reference model assessments available. Now consider the many use cases for the framework, both formal and informal, some of which we have previously discussed in training modules. Systems theory, organization learning, and psychology, coupled with dynamic systems maturity theory, has proven the strong relationship between functioning, learning, or maturity levels. Obviously, we're using that term interchangeably across all the organization dynamics, and the observed culture, practice, and outcomes and performance levels resulting from those functioning levels. As an organization progresses through the maturity development process and up the levels, it improves its own agility, innovation, and productivity, resulting in increased value creation for all the stakeholders. We now look at the different ways individuals and teams can use the body of knowledge and maturity assessment tools, either formally or informally. Could be as simple as an individual referencing the body of knowledge, online help, to understand how an organization functions, or to inform themselves of the development path for a specific construct that is important to their role and improvement of their contribution. At an organization level, it could be using focused or full assessment as a health check or a catalyst to identify and address change and improvement. A key challenge with teams is to gain consensus on the need for change in a specific domain or function. The use of an appropriate triage or diagnostic assessment can provide the process and the information to act as a catalyst to initiate change. Though leadership may accept the need for change, transformation, or improvement, getting key stakeholders to buy into that need is often a challenge. Again, involving them in the process by creating awareness and access to the body of knowledge and following up with an appropriate maturity assessment can facilitate their engagement and commitment building. There are always specific drivers for change and improvement. They may come externally or internally. They can be business or operational driven, and each may require a unique focus on specific dynamics and constructs, as well as the overall system maturity. Driver examples might be digital transformation, competitive activity, regulatory, or functional, including productivity and agility. The body of knowledge and assessment can be used to assess the readiness level to take on board a specific change and guide in the preparation for that change, assuring the success potential of the program. The framework provides a roadmap for next generation change and improvement across the organization and ecosystems. Benchmarking has informational, motivational, and diagnostic value when introduced and managed appropriately. It can also encourage healthy competition. Whether benchmarking is internal or external, the scientific basis for the OrgCMF reference model assure its validity and integrity in the process. The next module is an overview of the Organization Capability Maturity Framework digital platform. By following the link, you will be taken to a recorded training video demonstrating how to access and use the body of knowledge and the online maturity assessment tool.